Right, welcome back. Let us carry on talking about early childhood and cognitive development. This is the fourth lecture in the chapter on early childhood and the preschool age. So here I want to continue. Well, last we left off, we were talking about cognitive development and theory of mind. In this one, I want to talk about memory. So in the introduction in the general psychology class, memory is its own chapter. So it seems really disingenuous just to limit our discussion of childhood memory to one slide, but I'm going to do my best, right? So, well, a couple things that we need to understand about memory is it's actually three processes, right? So memory involves what's called coding, storage, and retrieval. And there are different sort of brain structures implicated in all of this. We have different depths, if we will, of memory. You have sensory memory, which is what you hear, which is what is going on around you. You have your working memory, which is the stuff you're using sort of in the moment. And then you have your long-term memory, which is stuff that's like sort of always going to be there. A conversation requires all of that. It requires you to hear the sounds that were just uttered a millisecond ago. It requires you to remember what you said a few moments ago, and it requires you to remember from long-term memory who you're talking about. Recall, right? So retrieval, you can have a sort of a recall that, oh yeah, when you're looking through a photo album and you remember that, that's right. And then you can have a free recall, which is tell me about when you were 2, right? Tell me about when you were 12, you may not come up with anything, but somebody wants to hand you a photo album and you flip through and you go, oh yeah, I remember that. So that's what's called recognition, right? But one of the things that researchers study as it relates to children and memory is that children have, right, this is probably, oh, that's right. So this is the discussion question I think I've asked you with this one, is what is the earliest childhood memory you have? And most people can go back to around 2 or 3. And what they're describing then is what psychologists refer to as autobiographical episodic memory, right? Autobiographical episodic memory. So it's an episode of their own life. And it was once thought that children had what was referred to as infantile amnesia, that they really couldn't remember anything prior to 3 years old. And others have argued, no, that's not true, because by the time you get to 3, you've learned your name, you know your parents' faces, you know lots of things. But it is true that you don't, very rarely, and even researchers are quite skeptical if when we claim that we remember our second birthday, probably they claim those are what would be called generic memories or memories from scripts. And those are you have a memory of the story. You don't necessarily have recall of actually being in the experience. Because one of the things that we know about memory is that, oh, phooey, I just lost my train of thought, is that we have what's called, it's called false source memories. So we remember an event, but it's based on having heard the story about the event, not actually having been there. I'll just use my daughter as an example. I remember, and I don't even remember the story anymore, but I remember at the dinner table one time, she was recalling an event, very vivid details of an event that she claimed that she remembered, but it actually happened before she was born. Right? There was no way. She did not have an autobiographical memory of it, but she had heard the story so many times that she had a script. She knew the script of the event, but she actually hadn't been there. So my point is that according to researchers, we don't actually have these autobiographical episodic memories of events until sometime around, maybe 3 or maybe 4, where we can recall having been there. And what improves the odds that we will have those memories, right? So there's a discussion in your book about childhood memories, and there's something called a social interaction model of memory. And what that says is that memory, so it's a basic memory principle that if we were in psychology together, we'd spend a lot of time talking about. And it's called elaboration. It's called elaboration personal reference effect. And the idea is that if a memory involves you, right, you're more likely to remember it. If the memory is very detailed, right, if it has lots of details if you elaborate on it, if you create mental images of it, you're going to hold on to that memory better. So what social interaction model of memory, I keep pointing over here because I've got my PowerPoint slides over here. What that says is the parents can improve the odds that a child will remember something if in their conversation, if when they go through the scripts of their events, they say things like, do you remember that time that we went to grandma's house and it was really cold and we saw that really pretty tree that had the bright yellow and red lights, and you said to me, oh mom, can't you smell that? The point is that when we can influence the formation of childhood memories by simply interacting, or maybe even going so far as to pointing things out to our children while they're happening, right? Like, notice how bright that tree is. Notice the yellow colors, and see how grandma is smiling. And this serves to elaborate, because one of the things we know about memories is that they're attached to something else in our memory systems. We're going to hold on to that information better. So there's something that parents can do, and it's called low versus high elaboration style. And in another textbook that I used to use, this concept was referred to in the context of I didn't set my timer, right? In the context of reading, and that when we read to a child, we can improve their retention of the story. Oh, phooey, I am so sorry. But we can improve what they remember, and we can improve their ability to learn about the words simply by elaborating, by talking about the book, by saying things like, how do you think that character feels? Well, the same thing applies to our memories, our childhood memories, that if we look at your grandma over there, doesn't she look happy? Why do you think she's happy, right? Or what do you think about those pretty lights? Or your brother's getting ready to open his present. How do you think he's going to feel? Oh, are you glad he, you know? So simply by elaborating on the events, talking about the events, it kind of goes back to what I think we're going to be saying over and over again, or what we saw in the last chapter with the still face experiment, that children thrive on our interaction. It improves their ability to handle their emotions. It improves their ability to remember things. It improves their vocabulary when we interact with them, right? Okay, this is it. Oh, we're going to carry on with that theme here when we move on to the next slide. Vygotsky, as I mentioned back from one of the earlier chapters, he's one of my favorite guys to talk about because his name is so fun to say. So he is used, he's often referred to his theory on learning, his theory on cognitive development. So he's the fellow that talks about the zone of proximal development. And this will be a quiz question, so I hope I'm clear in my explanation, and I hope you get this. And scaffolding. But one of the things that Vygotsky emphasized is that cognitive development, just like I just said, is enhanced by interaction, right? Now he goes further than to say interaction between adult and child, but certainly adults are the primary interaction that children have, right? And through our interaction with them, through our use of words with them, that children's brains develop and their ability to think develops. But children are not just limited to your interaction with adults, but children also interact with other children, and they learn about language skills through other children. And sometimes children will use toys, and it might be kids and toys and other kids, right? And they'll learn a different way to use a toy from another child. But a kid can also interact with toys and adults. So children learn about or develop their thinking, their way of thinking, and their use of symbols and their use of language through interaction with other people. What the zone of proximal development says, and this is it's like a place, it's like a cognitive place, that the best, that children will be most successful, they will get the most out of our interaction. They'll get the most out of teacher, student, adult, child interaction when we're working in that cognitive space. And it is it's the space between what a child already knows, what a kid can already do with their toys, the words they can already read by themselves, and what I can help them read. What can they get with a little bit of guidance, with a little bit of nurturing, right? And it's when we work in this space and we help a child. Actually, the zone of proximal development is not just about kids. It's about any kind of instruction. It's about any kind of learning, right? I mean, it's what a I don't want to say a good teacher, but you know, if an instructor or if someone is teaching so far above your understanding, you're not going to get any of it, right? Because it's not going to make any sense. If an instructor is teaching so far below you and you're like you're bored to tears, you're not going to get that either, because you're not going to, I mean, you already know it all. So the ideal place is right in between. So the concepts are just a little bit above your current understanding, or the math is just a little bit. I mean, you don't go from addition to algebra, right? You go from addition to multiplication, right? Just a little bit above it. And you go from, you know, double digit addition to single multiplication. You don't go from 2 + 2 to 22 × 6, right? You have to work in that space. That's what that means. It's the space right there. And then as you get to that next level, then you move up again, right? And so this is sort of what those tests, assessments are due when the first semester or the beginning of school, when kids come back, is they try to figure out where they are at so that we know where to work with you, right? That's the zone of proximal development. The process, that process of instruction where you're coached to get to the next level, that's called scaffolding. And if you know any carpenters, right, if you know any construction people, you build a scaffolding so you can climb up it, right? You have a scaffolding on the outside of the building so you can climb up it, so you can paint a little bit higher. You paint up higher and you move the scaffolding up. That's all that means. The scaffolding is the method of instruction to get to your next place. So I hope that makes some sense. Certainly, if it doesn't make some sense, I hope somebody will let me know in the comments or send me an email. Sarah, try that again. The zone is the space between what I already know and what I can know with your help, where I can get if you kind of coach me, right? And then I know that. And then once I know that, then the zone changes. Now I can get up here with your help, with your guidance, right? And that's what we call scaffolding. I think I'm going to stop right here, because in the next one, I'm going to talk about language development.